So for this topic, is actually fall into the chapter 16 according to our syllabus, okay? But because why 14? Because there's the way how I arrange my notes, okay? So I've arranged it as number 14, chapter number 14 that I teach my students, okay? But in the learning outcomes here, you can see that it belongs to the chapter 16, which is inherited change. So for today, we're going to look at two important parts. First is more to the terminology. So what are the terms that you guys are going to use it frequently in these topics, okay? And then the second part of the topics later will be the meiosis. I think that the Miss Nessa already covered the meiosis when you guys learn the mitosis. So again, it's a kind of revisions to bridge you guys to the next part. What we're going to do here is how the genetic variation can be arise, okay, can arise because of the meiosis. We do know that one of the importance or significance of the meiosis is to create genetic variation, okay? So basically this will be our topics for today, okay? So feel free to ask any questions you have, okay? Don't worry. Okay, so let us go through the terminology one by one. So what are the terminology that you guys or we need to go through for the first part of the topics here? We need to explain what it means by the homologous pair of chromosome. Why we call it homologous pair? Again, this is a quite common question asked. Okay, how you define a pair of chromosome, they are homologous. Okay, that's one. So second, a few other terminology that we need to learn here. We need to actually know what is meant by gene, locus, allele, dominant. Allele can be dominant allele, can be recessive allele, or both allele, they are co-dominants, okay? Means they're equally expressed. And then from the gene, from the allele, we do have the genotypes, phenotypes, homozygous, as well as heterozygous, okay? And then we need to know the term between what we means by haploid or diploid. Okay, so those are the terms that you need to know the definition. If you look at a past year paper, quite often, the question always asks, define allele, define what is meant by co-dominant, define phenotype, define genotype. So those are the definitions that you have to know. Okay, so a quick ones go through with you guys. Okay, now in each somatic cells, okay, we look at the somatic cells, like skin cells, for example, muscle cells, they are somatic cells. So somatic cells, we know that we have two sets of chromosomes. So this kind of cells, we call them as a diploid, or commonly we put it as 2N. Okay, we know about this, right? 2N. So when the somatic cells have 2Ns, why we call it two set of chromosomes? Because when fertilization takes place, we are formed. Okay, we are formed by one sperm cells and one ovum when the fertilization takes place. Correct or not? So it means that you're going to inherit one set of chromosome from father, another set chromosome from your mother, right, or our mother. So that's why it combined together become a diploid cells, and from the zygote continue to develop until the multicellular organism. So again, if you look at the diploid cells, if let's say we have a diploid 2N, if a diploid cell 2N equal to 4, so I'm going to draw one cell. Here, so if this cell actually have 4 chromosomes, because 2N, diploid cell with 4 chromosomes, so means that they must have 2 sets. So let's say this one, the blue color, large one, and the red color, large chromosome. Okay, and then we do have another pair, okay, smaller chromosome, green, for example, and orange. So in this case, you can see that if I divide them, you can see one big, one small, considered as one set, another big, another small chromosome as another set. So that's why these cells, we call them as a diploid. Okay, we call it as a diploid, okay, because they consist of paired chromosome. Okay, all chromosome, they are paired chromosome. Okay, so if I take out this large chromosome, If I take out large chromosome, how you know both of them? How you know both of them, they are homologous? Correct or not? Okay, how we know? Okay, it's not like based on the size, but based on the gene loci. Okay, so if you look at this is my chromosome, the blue color, I take out, and then had a red color. Okay, so what's mean gene locus? It's something like the address of the gene. So when we talk about the locus, locus basically is the positions of the gene. Okay, locus is position on the gene. So it means that if you want to look at a particular gene, let's say for example, if I look at the gene code for the blood group, okay, IA. Here, let's say this one, at the same positions of the same chromosome, okay, so this one, let's say IO, let's say for example. So you can see that each genes, they will have their own very distinct positions for that. So these positions, we call them as the locus or gene locus. So this one is a gene locus for blood group, or blood group gene locus. I may have other genes, let's say, okay, I may have other genes. Let's say gene code for, let's say, gene code for eye color. Can I see that? So this is the part that code, okay? So let's say blue color. Okay, and then you may have another one here. Oh, sorry. Okay, another. So they are the same position. Can I say same position, same location? Maybe I had a recessive allele, small b, that code for, let's say, for example, green color eyes, for example. So at each locations, so this location, we call them as a locus. So what it means by the gene? So each location, you have a gene, right? So when talk about the gene, so three important things you have to put it. They are part or segment of DNA. They are segment of DNA, consist sequence of the DNA nucleotide, okay, they consist a segment of DNA that consists sequence of DNA nucleotides, and what is the functions? They code for a specific polypeptide. Okay, gene code for polypeptide. So they code for specific polypeptides. Those are the gene. So it means that each locations you have a gene. Gene code for blood group, gene code for eye color, gene code for enzyme, gene code for hormone, gene code for. So it means that they have their own special location. We name them as a locus. But what's meant by allele? Okay, so question always asked about gene versus allele. So what is meant by allele? So we talk about alleles, they are the alternative form of the gene. Of a particular gene. So means that you always will inherit the gene. You will inherit the gene from a parent, but which allele? Are you clear? So for example, okay, gene. Example of the gene. Gene that code for our blood group. Gene that code for our blood group. But what kind of allele? Then you have the IA, IB, IO. Can you see that? There are three allele belongs to the genes of the blood group. Can you see that? Understand the concept between the allele and the gene? So if I need to take the photo, you can now. Okay, what's mean gene and also the locus. So it means that all allele, they belongs to the same gene. They will be located on the same gene locus. Are you clear? Okay, yeah. So as long as both, okay, as long as both of them, both chromosomes have the same gene, they have the same genes. Are you clear? As long as they have the same gene, then they qualify to be called as homologous chromosome. So it's a pair of homologous chromosome. As long as they have the same gene. Can you see that? Blood group, eye color. Let's say, for example, hemoglobin, okay, enzyme A. So as long as the sequence correct, same gene, everything correct, then they belongs to the homologous chromosome. But they may not have the same allele. Okay, be careful when you use the word. They have the same gene, but not the same allele, not necessary. Can you see that? This is for the blood group A. This is for the blood group O. They are not necessary, must have the same allele, but it must have the same gene. Both of them must have the same gene. Then we classify them, or we call them as the homologous chromosome. Are you clear? Okay. So now, if you look at the blood group again, in this case, then you realize that, okay, so now I'm target at one side only. This is one chromosome. Okay. This is one chromosome. Because of diploid, right? So it must be a pair, homologous chromosome. So both of them homologous. Okay, both of them homologous. Then we do know that just now here we have the blood group IA. This is the blood, okay, allele IO. Are you clear? So in this case, can you see that? One is IA, one is IO. We do know that IA together with IO, blood group will be A. Cannot A group. Okay, blood group A. So why blood group A? Because IA is a dominant allele. Okay, we learned this before, right? Okay, IA is a dominant allele, IO is the recessive allele. So dominant allele, okay, for dominant allele to be expressed, you only need one copy, okay, to get the effect from dominant allele. So you only need one copy, at least, okay? One copy enough already. But you want to see the effect, okay, from recessive allele, then no choice, you must have two copies of recessive allele. You must have two copies of recessive allele, then only you can see the effect. So in this case, you can see that if I put IA together, no problem, you will always get blood group A. Correct not? Because the effect, they are in the same allele, so they are expressed. If I put it IA and IO together, we still get the blood group A because the effect of the dominant allele IA must the effect of the recessive allele IO. Can I see that? Okay, so in this case, the combinations of two different kind of allele, we term it as a genotype. Can I see that? So genotype basically means that combinations of two allele. It can be the same allele, it can be a different allele. And then what we're going to have, or what we're going to detect here, we can detect, right? What we're going to detect here, we call it as a phenotype. Are you clear? So genotype basically will determine the phenotype. Not all cases, but we do know that genotype dictates our phenotype. Are you clear? Okay. So if you look at this again, so you have IA, IO. I may have another example of IO. Can I see that? So when you have two copies of the allele, they belong to the same allele. So this one, we're going to term it as the homozygous. Same goes to IO, also homozygous. Homo means same. Homologous, right? Homologous. Can I say that? Logous means locus. Homo, so it means that the same locus, same gene. So homologous. In this case, homozygous. Okay, but homozygous, we a bit confused here because it can be both of them dominant allele, so it becomes homozygous dominant. for the IA, but IO, then we call it as a homozygous recessive. Okay, homozygous recessive. So in this case, no hindrance, no blockage, no, it cannot be masked in this case by the dominant allele. That's why blood group O. Can I see that? Blood group O for IO. Okay, but we do have one other example here when we have both allele IA and IB together. In this case, we call them as the heterozygous. As long as two different, okay, as long as two different allele together, in this case, for that particular gene locus, definitely we call them as a heterozygous. But heterozygous, you do not need to talk about heterozygous dominant or heterozygous recessive. There's no such thing called as heterozygous dominant or heterozygous recessive. Okay, so for example, another ones you can have is IA, IO, IB, IO. So because there are two different, can I see that? Two different allele, so therefore we term them as heterozygous, but particularly special for IA, IB, the blood group here is AB. The phenotype is blood group AB. So why? Why? Because both of them equally express. A also dominant, B also dominant. So both of them equally express. We use the third word here. So both of them equally express. Means that no one showed the full dominant in this case. I show dominant, you also show dominant. So we share together. So in this case, we call them this both allele, IA and IB allele, both of them, they are co-dominant. Are you clear? So it means that both of them, they are equally dominant. Okay, so a few terms that we already actually go through, I have gone through with you guys. Okay, first, okay, diploid. Sorry, okay, first term, diploid. Okay, diploid. I haven't talked about it when you guys are haploid yet. And then we look at this, what's meant by homologous chromosomes. So I repeat here, homologous chromosome basically means that both chromosomes have the same gene at the same locus. Are you clear? So what is meant by locus? So locus basically is something like your address, right? Okay, I mean, for example, someone asks you where you stay. Oh, I stay in condo A. Okay, which floor? Can I see that? Which house, which unit? So this, you can imagine that chromosome is something like a condominium. So each floor, which unit. So they have a particular locus. Are you clear? Okay, so what's been locus? Locus basically is a position of a gene. Okay, when we talk about locus, so what's mean locus? They are the locations of a particular gene. So what's mean by gene? Gene actually basically is a segment of your DNA. We do know that our DNA is very, very long. Our DNA, right? So a particular segment here that consists of what? Consists of a sequence of a DNA nucleotide ATCG, which we can actually transcribe and translate to a particular specific polypeptide. Okay, so a particular gene will give us a particular characteristic, but what kind of characteristic will be determined by the allele? Okay, what kind of characteristic? Whether you're going to have blood group A, blood group B, it determines by the allele. We do always have the gene that for our blood group, but what kind of blood group will be controlled or will be determined by the alleles that we inherit from our parents. Okay, so what's mean allele? Allele is an alternative form of a gene, right? What's mean alternative? Means that you don't have only one, you have many of them. Okay, let's say for example, okay, blood group IA, IB, IO, they are alternative form of the blood group gene. So that's why I use these as an example. If you look at the gene code for the blood group. Okay, so determines by the cell surface proteins, okay, or surface antigen. So alleles will be IA, IB, and IO. So it depends on the combinations of these three alleles. We're going to have what we call as the genotypes. So genotype will be able to determine our phenotype. Okay, so in terms of genotypes, basically you have two, right? Why two? Well, it cannot be three because we are diploid. So diploid means that we only can inherit one copy of allele from father, one copy of allele from our mother. So therefore we only have two. So it depends on the combinations. If the combinations, both of them, they are the same allele, then we call the particular gene, okay, and the particular genes, they are homozygous dominant. Okay, if the allele is a dominant allele. So how you determine whether they are dominant allele or not? It depends on how they can be expressed. If they, even with one copy, they still, or in a heterozygous condition, they still can express, then we know that that particular allele is a dominant allele. But if you can see that they must have two copies, they must, die must have two copies to be expressed, then we do know that, or we do term them as the homozygous recessive, and the particular allele is a recessive allele. Okay, but if both of the genotypes, if the genotype show the two different types of the allele, for example, IA, IB, IAIO, IBIO, then we term it as the heterozygous. Okay, heterozygous. And in some special conditions, particularly in the heterozygous case, then you can see that both allele, they are equally expressed. So it means that in the phenotypes there, you will see, at the phenotype, you can see that both effect, okay, IA effect also come out, IB effect also come out. So in this stage, we call them as the co-dominant. So both allele, they are co-dominant. Okay, so basically, this is a summary for the terminology that you need to know. Okay, so if you want to take a photo, you can. Hopefully not too small for you guys. Okay, want to take a photo? Okay, but if you haven't done yet, we have final ones. We have to know here is the haploids. So what is meant by haploid? So if the diploid cells reduce the number of chromosomes from two sets of paired chromosome to one set unpaired chromosome through a process called meiosis, or in some books we use the word reduction division. Clear? Through the process of meiosis, we will be able to reduce the number of chromosomes into half. Cronot. Okay, we divide it into the half. Okay, through the meiosis process, then our chromosome number become the haploid chromosome number. From 2n just now become n. Okay, so not means that we reduce the number only, but we have to make sure that the chromosome now they are unpaired. No longer have the homologous chromosome anymore. So it means that if I started with the cells, let's say they are homologous chromosome. So at the end of the process, this is 2n equal to 2. So it's a diploid. After meiosis, we're going to get two cells, each of them with only one set of chromosome. Can I see that? Oh, sorry. Okay, with one set of chromosome. So this one is the haploid cell with n. Can I see that? So meiosis can help us to do this. Are you clear? Okay, so this meiosis. If you want to go into more detail, basically this is after meiosis 1, and we have to continue with the meiosis 2, which we're going to discuss in more detail later. Okay, so do you guys have any questions? So no question, actually can go through my notes. Okay, so all explanation already inside here already. Just that I want to specify a term here called chromatin and chromosome. What is the difference between chromatins and chromosome? This one you have learned in AS. Chromatins basically is a thin structure, thin thread structure. So when they condense, okay, the condensations will make these chromatins into condensations, make the chromatins now make it into chromosome. Okay, So don't say chromosome condensed. Condensed must be chromatin is the one that condensed. Okay, so you can go through the notes. Okay, so everything already there. You can read it. So this kind of chromosome we call it the metaphase chromosome. Okay, because in anaphase different already. In anaphase difference. So nothing special. So we have haploids, diploids. You have learned about this just now. So what is mean gene locus? It's a position, and we know about this. So what is a gene? So it's a segments of DNA make up of the DNA nucleotides code for the specific sequence of they consider specific sequence of nucleotides. So code for a particular polypeptides. Okay. So the alternative form, a different form, alternative form, we known as the alleles. Okay. So it can be either homozygous or heterozygous. So when say homozygous, it must be the same. Different ones for heterozygous. Okay. So the gene can be either, as an allele, can be either dominant or recessive. Okay. But in some cases, you may have the co-dominant case that contribute both. Okay, the effect on both allele can be seen. Okay, particularly in heterozygous conditions. So you can try to the terminology. Okay. My mistake here, not mistakenly check the notes. It's not across this one. It should be down. Okay, it should be down. So the answer is here. So I stopped for a while. So at least later when you view the video, you can actually get the answer. So with this, I have done for the first part of the lessons. Okay, let me stop the recording.